Hello and welcome. This is a mini documentary highlighting what college-age students in my community think about pseudoarchaeology and their views. I'm getting a call from them now. Let's see what they have to say. So what's your name?
I'm Steven.
All right, Steven. So I got a few questions for you. How much of public history that's taught to you is true or accurate?
I think generally speaking, it's true and accurate, but skewed. I think a lot of times the narrative might be skewed in a way to push a certain agenda. That's all just theory, but I think it's plausible, but I think it's all based in truth.
Yeah, so then when you think about archaeology, who's usually telling the story? And can you describe the first image that you think of?
I'd say the first image I think of is some dude in like khaki cargo pants, one of those funny little archaeologist hats. And I think that's normally who's telling the stories. Scientists, maybe somebody from a museum. I think of Indiana Jones. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
Oh, what's your name?
William Hoffer.
All right, William, we're gonna just ask you a couple questions. So, how much of public history that's taught to you do you think it's true or accurate?
I think most of it is fairly true, but not quite accurate to our understanding, because everybody wants to sell us something, and we can't, say, hey, I'm gonna sell you the truth, because you gotta have something you want out of it. And so, finding out like what's true, what they're trying to sell you, and everything, it's pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So my next question for you is, what do you think about archaeology? Who is usually telling the story, and describe the first image you can think of?
Honestly, I think about like the pyramids and stuff, and like how we don't know anything about them. We just sort of have to make stuff up about them and hope it makes sense. Like everything that we know about them is purely made up. Like nothing.
Yeah.
Just like,
All right. Thank you so much. All right. What's your name?
Isaac?
All right, Isaac. So how much of public history is taught to you is true or accurate?
I think that most of history that is taught in college or at universities is true. They might choose to leave out certain details, but for the most part it's true, and it gives you the needed picture to know what has happened throughout the course of history, whether it be in the world or in the United States of America.
All right, and then when you think of archaeology, who's usually telling the story? Describe the first image that comes to your mind.
When I think of archaeology, I really think that history is almost telling the story. We can learn so much from digging up things from the past and seeing what had happened. I just think that the narrative of history itself can help to paint this story.
All right, what's your name?
My name is Anthony Dervis.
All right, so I'm just gonna ask you a few questions. How much of public history that's taught to you is true or accurate?
Let me think about this one. I think when it comes to public history, there's a lot of things that are accurate, I'd say. Like, I look at the American Revolution, I'm like, yeah, like, the Americans won. I think that's pretty accurate, right? But then, some history about, how our Earth was made. A lot of people say that, the Earth is round, but in reality, is that entirely true or accurate? I don't know. I think there's some claims with the flat Earth. I think there's some evidence for that. So it's how much of it is true? I don't really know.
Okay, yeah. And then when you think of archaeology, who's usually telling the story? And then what's that first image that comes to your mind?
I think the people who are telling the story, honestly, are the people who write the textbooks, and also Indiana Jones.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, what's your name?
My name is Tom Williams.
All right, Tom. So how much of public history that's taught to you is true or accurate?
I'd say a good portion is, just because there are multiple historians looking at it and fact checking it. Obviously, most people are dead, so you have no clue about times before things were videotaped, so there's a margin of error there, but I would say pretty generally accurate.
Okay, yeah. And so when you think about archaeology, who's usually telling the story? And describe the first image that you can think of.
First image I can think of are fossils, so like paleontologists or other archaeologists being described in like a newscast or various articles.
All right, thank you. All right, and that's from our interviewees. So just to go over some things, a lot of the interviewees that we interviewed, they didn't really discuss the pseudoarchaeology aspect, and a lot of them kind of knew about pseudoscience, but not the pseudoarchaeology. But what they did get right is, to quote from Steven, he said that there's just skewed agendas, narratives to push an agenda. And as William put it, also, everyone wants to sell you. And I think that that can be really connected back to the pseudoarchaeology of they're just trying to prove a point at any means possible because they're not using all of the evidence and they're just using little pieces and a big picture to push a narrative, just like Stephen put it. And as Isaac's also putting it, he said they leave out certain details. And I think that can also be connected to the pseudoarchaeology of they're going to leave out these details that might disprove the pseudoarchaeology claims. Like I studied with the pyramids and aliens, they left out a ton of details and they didn't actually look at the full picture of the pseudoarchaeology and the archaeology that actually had been done on the sites. And Anthony also kind of displayed that some people in my community do fall for this pseudoscience, even though they may not do pseudoarchaeology, they're still falling for their pseudoscience. And I saw this when Anthony said that there are some claims for the flat earth that there's just some evidence for that. And I think a lot of that evidence is pseudoscience. Not necessarily the pseudoarchaeology like we're studying in this case, but in my community I feel like they understood the idea of pseudoscience more than pseudoarchaeology. And after the fact, I did explain to all of them what pseudoarchaeology was. Before I gave them the brief, after I gave them an even more in-depth understanding of what pseudoarchaeology really was. And Tom, our last interview, who I just hung up with, he was talking about, a direct quote from him is, fossils and paleontologists. And that doesn't really go with what archaeology is, because archaeology is the study of human past through those physical remains. In paleontology and fossils, that's not going to be necessarily all human remains. And he talked about like dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs aren't really studying the human past because the humans really weren't there. And so that's not really studying archaeology, but as he put it, paleontology. And so after the fact, I did tell him that that is different from archaeology, and that the pseudoarchaeology, to just define it one last time for the end of this documentary, is using archaeology in a way to skew a narrative when they're using a big picture idea, they're leaving out the little details, and there's really no way to prove it and there's no way to dispute it just because of the way that it's presented. Thank you for watching this mini documentary. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great day.